Hope everyone out there is doing well. I am Oliver Wang. It's my privilege and honor to moderate for today. And I wanted to thank Morgan and Yvette and the rest of the Guild for this invitation to, again, moderate this awesome panel. Real quick, just to kind of shout out who we have with us today. We have the two music supervisors from the film, Morgan Rhodes. Want to say hi, Morgan?
Hey everyone.
And then Kier Lehman. Hi, Kier.
Hi, everybody.
We also have Archie Davis, Executive Music Producer and Senior Vice President of Marketing and A&R at RCA Records. Hey, Archie.
Hi, everybody.
And we have Spencer Beighley, Executive Producer, Head of Film for the Springhill Company. How's it going, Spencer?
Hey, everybody.
And is Malcom in the mix?
I don't think he is yet.
All right. Well, we're supposed to have Malcolm Lee, who of course directed Space Jam and New Legacy, and we'll wait to see when he pops in. We're going to spend most of our time talking about the music for the new film, but I thought we could start by having each of you talk about what was your relationship, if any, to the original Space Jam, and how did that influence, if at all, how you approached the work that you did on A New Legacy? And Spencer, why don't we start with you? Because I'm assuming you were the first person to get involved within the panel. You were the first person to get involved with the project.
Yeah. So just to talk a little bit about the music from the beginning of it and kind of our thought process behind that.
Well, I also want to know what your relationship was to the original Space Jam. And then how does that bridge over into sort of how you worked on this new film?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I had a film over at the Springhill Company, which is LeBron James and Maverick Carter's company. And, you know, I started about 4.5, 5 years ago, and Space Jam was the one thing that has been on the slate, I think, predating Springhill. You know, it's been on there forever, and finding out the right iteration of how to tell that, of how to do a sequel for that movie. So, you know, it went through a lot of development before finding the team that you have here today and getting Malcolm on it and getting, you know, Archie works over at Proximity, and also getting Ryan Coogler onto this movie, who was a big part of it. And once we had that crew, the movie really started to come together, and we really started to kind of think about, and this dovetails into music as well, but how we wanted to really tell the story. You know, there was the question, is it a sequel? Is it a complete reimagining? What exactly is it? Kind of hence the title. And I think the goal with everything was really to capture the nostalgia of the original, but make a movie for a new generation and kind of meld those two together rather than making a straight remake of something or a straight sequel. So that was kind of the thought process and kind of my introduction with it.
Yeah. And Spencer, just to clarify, what I meant by an introduction, what I meant by relationship is, were you a fan of the original? Is it something that you grew up with?
Yeah, man. I mean, I remember seeing this movie, I think it was like 2 or 3 times opening weekend when it first came out in '96. I was 10. And I love that. I love that movie. I saw it a ton. And it's one of those movies that I think, me personally, I can throw on all the time and watch multiple times a year. But some will also say that the soundtrack of that movie kind of almost outshines the movie itself, and is something that I also remember listening to all the time and going through. So yeah, I'm absolutely a big fan of it.
Yeah. Archie, let's hear from you.
To simply put it, I was a huge fan of the original one. Like, I had the alarm clock, I had the curtains on the wall, I had the rug, the towels, the bedspread, the Sega game, like the Secret Stuff cup. And what I remember about it is just the way that the music was able to just penetrate my everyday life to make these things and all of this world want to be a part of my life.
Yeah.
So to get the honor and the call, you know, from Coog and the team to have the honor to work on something like this, it's like, wow, to think like there's going to be a child that will, you know, have all of these same experiences that I had, and how does music apply in terms of like that entry point into those memories. So yeah, I was a huge fan.
You still have your lunchbox? Because that probably goes for decent money on eBay, I bet. So
still don't. It's somewhere in Fresno. The curtains are somewhere. You know, like it's all somewhere in storage, I'm sure.
Yeah. Kier, how about you?
Yeah, I definitely remember, you know, watching the movie as a kid, and just being a huge basketball fan and a big Jordan fan, you know, just being, you know, into everything around it. But I think, you know, it even like, I remember it, but I mostly remember like all of the kind of
culture around it and the things, you know, like Archie was saying, just like the things, the marketing, the toys and all the things around it that, you know, were just kind of everywhere, and everybody, you know, even, you know, up through this movie coming out, you know, you would still find Space Jam clothing with logos and stuff on it, you know, 20 years after the movie. It still was just something that was so pervasive. And of course the soundtrack and hearing that music that was always on the radio, you know, and that would be on the radio for, you know, decades after that movie, and things that, you know, people were always, you know, would just come on and they would just live in culture. So it was just like that huge cultural impact that that movie had, that it never really went away.
Yeah. Yeah. And last but certainly not least, Morgan, how about yourself?
I wasn't 10, you know what I mean? I'm not going to get into any specifics about just how old I was. I'll say I was younger when the film came out. Pray for me. But I do remember the soundtrack, and it was a time, it's 1996, November 12th. Why I know that, I don't know. But it was November 12th, 1996. And I remember starting to think, you know, really heavily about soundtracks in the 90s. To Spencer's point, a lot of times the soundtracks were the attraction. So it was, you know, the time of Love Jones, Higher Learning, Above the Rim, Friday. I was starting to think about a lot. And I took my niece, who was really young at this time, to see Space Jam. But I do remember more than anything else just being consumed with the soundtrack, because I thought it was a really good one.
And especially for the benefit of our audience here from the Guild, Morgan and Kier, can you each talk about how you ended up being hired for this project? And in particular, is it unusual to have two music supervisors working on the same film?
This was the first time I'd ever music supervised with someone. And it was exciting coming into it, because I had heard that Kier was attached. And so it was just exciting for me to get the opportunity to work with him. I'm a fan of work and love Kier, so I was excited about this. I was excited about the cultural currency of the film, of Space Jam, and the meaning. And I was just so excited. I thought it was just such a long shot. When I found out I was going to interview for it, I was like, you got to be kidding me. In fact, my agent wasn't the one that called me. It was someone else from the agency. And the first thing she said to me is, you know, are you sitting down? And I said, well, no, I'm in Walgreens, you know, in line. And so she was like, well, when you get out, call me back. And that's when she told me that this was happening. So the opportunity to work on something that is so, you know, relative to music and a movement around the movement.
Oh, did we lose Morgan for a sec? Looks like it. Kier, why don't we go for you meanwhile?
Yeah, so, you know, I was also, you know, pretty excited when I got the call that I was going to meet on the movie. And I had, you know, done a few movies with Warner Brothers before the studio that made the movie. So I had a relationship with them, and was kind of in the middle of a couple of things actually with them at the time, which one of them actually was canceled because of COVID, but Space Jam went on. And I went in and got to meet with, you know, all the producers involved and the filmmakers. And, you know, Archie was there. He was part of the crew, and Ryan and Spencer. And, you know, we were up, there was a few people up for the job, but I guess, you know, we had a good interview, and they decided to go with us. And I think also partly on this movie, like, we all knew this was going to be a big music project, and that there was going to be, you know, a big soundtrack involved, and a lot of music for the film. And so I think they were really assembling like a big team that would be able to kind of handle all of the needs that were going to come up as we went through it.
So in terms of the music, and this really can go out to anybody on the panel here, I would love to know, how did the musical vision for the film take shape and evolve? In particular, was it always the intention to have the film have a soundtrack that was all original songs, as opposed to, you know, licensing some older ones? And so I don't know if maybe we can start with either Archie or Spencer about that question, and then we'll bring in Kier and Morgan.
Want to take it, Archie?
Go for it, Spence. You got it.
Yeah, I mean, it might be better for you to kind of dive into. I'm just thinking about it a little bit on kind of the thought process of new music versus old music. I mean, something that we always talked about a little bit was that the soundtrack in general was so different, right? You had like a Quad City DJ song, you had a 9-minute D'Angelo song, like it was all over the place. So I think, you know, kind of figuring out old and new music and you had a Steve Miller Band, you know, song in there too. You had all that stuff in there, kind of figuring that out. See, you know, I was getting in trouble with Archie on this one, but tell me about that. We, you know, I think it was just really finding a melting pot of it and going from that. And the first one did that so well. And was able to do that so well that it was just trying to kind of capture that spirit as well as, you know, just a melting pot of different songs, both old and new.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit to what you're saying, we made a kids movie, and a lot of like, you know, we wanted to be very forward thinking and make sure like with the evolution of who algorithm is and what an algorithm really means, and just like not necessarily trying to stay within a box. Malcolm, I will say, had a very, very, very clear vision of the music that he drew to, you know what I'm saying? And and I think that was what helped us bridge like where some of like the sample records may come in, you know what I'm saying? But we get an evolution of something totally new. Because Malcolm is heavy Tribe Called Quest, heavy East Coast rap for sure. And I think with his guidance, we're able to just like bridge a beautiful gap like of what that new sound could potentially be and evolve like over time as well.
And Morgan, I know I think you got dropped off for a minute. So just to bring you up to speed. So I was just asking how the musical vision for the soundtrack came about, and in particular, whether the intention to have all original songs on the official soundtrack was from a day one kind of ambition, or was that something that evolved over time? So if you and Kier want to talk about, again, how you, especially in your roles as supervisors, how did you see the musical evolution of this soundtrack come about? And Morgan, why don't we start with you again?
I think one of the things that we were most ambitious about and really wanted to do was to bridge generations. We wanted to catch people sonically that had seen the first film, that were adults, that had seen it, who were children, and who had never seen it before. So I think we wanted to touch all the cultural touchstones sonically to make sure that we wedded the styles, implemented the styles of today with the styles of yesterday. So I think our goal was to make something that was fun and exciting, but most importantly, be able to catch a lot of different sonic palettes from across the generations. So a touch of the old, a touch of the new, I think was the goal from day one.
Yeah, I think one of the important things, also the way that soundtracks have kind of evolved in the streaming era, is that, you know, they're really mostly valuable with when they have new original music, because if we're not giving if it doesn't have something new, then people are going to be able to, you know, make their playlist or find that music, you know, easily. So I think that was part of, you know, what drove us to have a lot of original music, was that to create something that was going to, you know, have a value and attract people to the movie and be unique to our story. And give us some, you know, to kind of recreate, you know, hopefully something of a piece of what the original soundtrack was.
Along those lines, I'd love to know more about what was the brainstorming like around which artists to invite? Because, I mean, this is a soundtrack that has everyone from, you know, in terms of representing the new, as you all have been talking about, you have Saweetie on here, right? You have Lil Uzi Vert. At the same time, you have Salt and Pepper, right? You have, you know, a very prominent MC Hammer usage in the film, not on the soundtrack. But I'm just wondering, how did you figure out which artist to approach to commission these songs from? And again, anyone on the panel can take this one.
I think we kind of came together in the beginning with, you know, kind of making up wish lists of artists that we would love to have involved. You know, talking to Malcolm and this group, you know, this was kind of the core creative group talking about about music and artists. And so we kind of made our wish list and we reached out to artists directly. But we also kind of went out a little more broadly to, labels and publishers and managers and people that we all kind of had connections with to see if they had ideas and people who wanted to be a part of it. And so some of them came from, specifically reaching out to artists to create things. And some were things where artists, knew we were working on it and submitted things to us that ended up working out really well for the film. So it was really kind of a combination of things that we were targeting and things that were, kind of came to us through the process and people that we were talking to about it.
Archie, Spencer, either of you want to add anything on this?
Oh, I was just going to say that.
Also, my bad. Go ahead, Morgan.
I was going to say
go for
it spread really fast that we were working on Space Jam. So we sort of got flooded with interest from artists. It felt like we were, getting submissions and reach outs from everybody once the word spread. And it's that type of film. It had that type of reputation that lots of artists wanted to be involved. So there was no shortage of people reaching out to us to talk about music or inquire about music.
And publishers, like you guys were having conversations with everybody on that side, and some of the records that were put together and structured and kind of given the artists as a little bit of an alley-oop. So yeah.
I was also curious, I think of the panel only, and again, if I get this part wrong, I apologize. I think only Kier has had extensive experience working on an animated film in the past. And so is there a difference in terms of how you think about the role of music in an animated film as opposed to if this was purely live action? And again, I'll throw it to anyone there.
I think in with animation, I think you can kind of push things a little bit further musically to kind of, really have fun with it in kind of in a way like animation. I always think about it in horror or kind of genres where you can really push music over the top and it doesn't go too far. It's hard to go too far because especially with an animated movie like this, there's so much action and so much, movement on screen that, the music really needs to work with that and provide a lot of energy and match the energy that we're seeing on screen. So a lot of what we kind of were working towards was songs with a lot of tempo, faster tempos, and that could really play with and support, the action scenes, whether it's like the main title sequence where it's like LeBron's highlight reel or like a training montage that we have in the movie or in the game. Of course, there's a lot going on. So that's we definitely trended towards music that had a lot of energy to it.
Anyone else?
Archie? This was my first time working in this capacity on any film, actually. And then I would say I just started to nerd out. Like at first, it was kind of like just seeing what I could ask Warner Brothers for to start doing research. And I was like, well, let me see if I could get all of the old Looney Tunes cartoons just to see the fonts and hear the music and see the flow. And I got it. So I just would nerd out at my office and just go through. People were like, bro, this isn't working. You cannot possibly be telling me you're working right now. But it absolutely helped. And then also understanding that through this process, Warner Brothers was attempting to launch new animated characters in these Looney Tunes into the world again. So what those voices sounded like and all of those things were very important. But yeah, it was, and Chris Bowers and just making sure that with what he was doing with the score, as out of this world as his work is, making sure that the music just didn't sound like a crash once we kind of got in there when the song transitions.
Yeah. And shout out to Chris Bowers for being the composer for the film and the score. Morgan or Spencer, in terms of how did you think this film, I mean, Spencer, you've worked on other films in the past. I believe this was your first animated, and Morgan, I think also this is the first animated project you've worked on. So did you notice any differences in terms of your approaches or what the challenges were because it was animated as opposed to live action.
It was a different way for me to think about music. It was different because it was animated. It was different and special because it was the Looney Tunes. So my whole philosophy was fun and energy, like Kier said. If you spend time looking at clips of Daffy Duck, Porky Pig, Lola Bunny, Foghorn Leghorn, Pepe Le Pew, if you spend your time looking at clips, it changes your feeling about music. And typically I work on things that have, a heavy historical currency. So to come into this and for the goal to be fun, for me, made me think about music differently and made me approach music differently. And it was really cool and refreshing to be able to do it on a project like this.
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit and back to Archie's point, like on any movie, you want to make sure that the music really, combines well with the overall soundscape of the movie, whether that's, the sound work or the score or whatever that is. And I think this is no different and even more so important because, Archie talking about the cartoons and those sounds, like you want to make sure that when those sounds come in, like on about that time, and kind of what that is, which you might see a clip of, like that type of, like those types of Looney Tune sounds where you have, the Roadrunner going through, but that's still needing to work with the soundscape of the movie. Whenever these songs went in and I would sit down and watch a cut of it after, Kier, Morgan, and Archie are getting in the movie and just looking at it, it was really interesting to see how these work together, or if they didn't, what we did within the soundscape, note within the soundscape to make sure that it did all sound seamless and come together.
Yeah, great. We want to get to those clips in just a minute, but I did have one more question before we get there. And I'm super curious about this. And I guess, Spencer, you probably would be the best person to start with, at least. Where was Lebron in this in terms of, did his input shape sort of the music at all? I just have this scene in my head where he's sending notes over saying, we need more Craig Mack or something like that. So did Lebron contribute to the sonic shape of this film?
It's so funny. I'm sure everybody has their thoughts on this one because he came into it. I mean, I think that, LeBron's like A&R some days, like he is in it on music, right? And if you follow him on Instagram, you can see that he has a really big musical presence, and we'll just kind of, show clips of him listening to music and the music that's out there and getting certain songs to kind of come up. So yeah, he like definitely had some songs that he loved that he introed into the movie that he wanted to get in. Joyner Lucas was one of them that he really wanted to, get into this. And there were other kind of artists on it that he definitely had a hand in kind of pushing. But Kier, Lehman, Morgs, feel free to chime in on that. But he's not in every single piece of the movie when it goes through, but when it comes to music, he's like, let me turn it up to 11 and get in there.
I'll say this. One thing that I found out is before Lil Baby wrote his verse for We Win, him and LeBron had a conversation. And the LeBron conversation with him was just like about what he was looking for and like wanting to be triumphant and prosperous and like still feeling love and like energetic, but like something that could last a lifetime. And we got the first Lil Baby trap gospel verse of all time. So thanks to A&R LeBron for that, because I don't think that perspective would have gotten there without him pushing that across the line for sure.
Thank you for sharing this. That's awesome. Kier, Morgan, your thoughts?
I mean, I think he's just, overall presence and influence over the film, was something we all had in mind as we were going through it. So there were those specific things, but also just kind of as an overall, I think, thought in our mind was like, does this fit in with him as a character in this movie, but also his personality and character as a person, as a basketball player, and all that.
Morgan?
I had the feeling as we were working on this, when we were choosing songs or thinking about songs, I did have his taste in mind, and I wanted to, explore things that were culturally relevant for now, the now sound, and something that the kids would rock out to, that the kids would enjoy. And he is on the pulse. He is on the pulse of what's hot right now. He is on the pulse of what's being played in the streets and heard in the streets. So I did have that in mind as we were working on this.
All right. So who wants to tell us, how did this song come about? And in terms of strategizing how to use it within the film, let's hear about that as well.
We had, we started by just kind of pitching existing songs. We had a meeting with Malcolm and started giving him, some existing songs to figure out, what's the style here, what's going to work in this scene. And we, talked about some things. I think we went through the things that we had pitched, and there was stuff in there that was okay, but it kind of just brought up a conversation with Malcolm, and I think maybe it was Archie or Malcolm brought up another song that, ended up becoming what our kind of temp song was. And we lived with that for a long time, but I think we always felt like that was such a prime real estate to have something new and original there, that it would be, a waste if we had just kept an existing song in that spot. So I think we went out to a few people to do demos on that, and the producer Oak Felder really captured that kind of energy that we needed in that spot. And so he created that track, and he had been working, I think he worked on it with Chance the Rapper's producer. And so that was how we got to bring Chance into it. And so the first demo is just that track with Chance doing like a really rough verse. And I think we saw some potential in it, but it wasn't nailing it yet. It was like, a seed of an idea was there. And so we just kept going back to Oak and having him develop it. And Oak had been friends with this young rapper Simba, who was an LA artist who was, just kind of coming up. And he was also somebody that Lebron had featured on his Instagram when he did a freestyle for Power 106. And so there was already that kind of connection with LeBron there. And so they brought in Simba to do some more work on that song. And he really kind of brought it together and made it into a real song, and had a couple of hooks that he added in there, the Clear for Takeoff and those kind of things that really made it into something that felt special and that felt fun and really, gave a lot of the excitement and the energy that scene needed. And so I think after Chance heard what Simba did, it got him excited about it, and he went back in and redid his verse to make it better. And even towards the kind of back half of that piece, it kind of takes another turn with the string element that comes in. So we had somebody do a string overlay over that track that kind of gave it another emotional tone and some depth to it, because that piece is 2 minutes long, as you just saw. So it goes through a lot of different stages, and it needs to keep moving and progressing to keep the energy going and match, the tone of the images. And I think the last piece that came into it was that we knew we needed another kind of voice and a singing voice to, really round it out. And Oak had been in contact with John Legend and was kind of talking to him about the idea. And Malcolm also had a great relationship with John Legend. So Malcolm reached out to John and, really suggested to him that he should get on it. And Malcolm really wanted him to be a part of it. And so he did his part at the end, which, just took it over the top and made it feel really epic. And hearing his voice in there is also kind of timeless. So that was like one that I was especially proud of putting that together, from what all of us did for putting all of these together, because it was such a big moment and such a featured moment. And it looks like Malcolm is about to join us. But it was such a key moment to the film that we really had to kick it off with something that was going to be exciting and get people hyped and excited for the film. So that was my kind of experience in working on that one.
Got it. And Kier, thank you for notifying me, as well as Archie, that Malcolm is in the mix. Malcolm, how's it going? You're still on mute. There we go.
How about now?
There we go.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'm good. I'm sorry. I'm late. I was out with my kids riding bikes. It's a beautiful, beautiful day here on the East Coast, and I lost track of time. I was like, oh, I better get going. So Apologies for the late start, but very glad to be here.
It's all good. Better late than never. Absolutely. Two questions that we had asked the panel earlier that I would love to get your input on. And the first is, what was your relationship like to the original Space Jam? Was this something that, again, and we don't talk ages here, so I'm not even going to make a guess at how old you would have been back in '96. But what was your relationship like to the original movie?
Okay, if I'm being completely honest, and I'm gonna be completely honest, I had no relationship to the movie. I was just finishing or just the tail end of film school, and I was wondering why I hadn't, been the next Orson Welles. And so, a family movie was not in my sphere, even though I can't even say I was a Jordan fan. I love the Looney Tunes. But like Jordan kept beating up on the Knicks, so I wasn't like rushing out to see it. And so I didn't really have a relationship with the original Space Jam. So that's the honest to goodness truth of it. I remember the soundtrack quite a bit because it was huge.
Right.
Obviously, the end title song. I'm not going to say it or the artist. We all know who. He who cannot be named. Yes. Yeah, who can't be named. Classic, beautiful, transcendent song. But Monica's, For You I Will. I remember I was just with some friends who had gotten married right around that time, and they couldn't remember their wedding song, but I remember distinctly it was that For You I Will by Monica. So they were like, oh God, that was what it was. I was like, yeah, I remember that better than you guys. So yes, the soundtrack had a very indelible mark on me.
Yeah. And along those lines, so what was some of your musical ideas coming into the project that you wanted to make sure that would be built into the final film?
I knew we had a very high bar to follow because the soundtrack, and again, there's a lot of nostalgia attached to both the movie and the soundtrack. And soundtracks of the 1990s were like, just as big, if not bigger, than the movies sometimes. So it's kind of an impossible mark to hit, but we still had to strive for it. And I think for me, yes, let's be edgy, let's be current, but let's also at the most have fun, because it's a family movie, it's a kids movie. And it should, the music, it should feel not just of the moment, but it can be as classic as, some of the songs from the original soundtrack. So I think when I look for music, I want, everybody wants a hit, right? Like a forever hit, that you can always like listen to, harken back to the scene that you saw it in, and then reminds you of a time in your life.
Right. Yeah.
So I think for me, it was like, let's make sure that we have music that is fun and fits the scene. And that's always the thing also. It's, I think, and, Kier and Morgan and Archie can speak to this more, but it feels like an inspired by soundtrack is an easier curation of music than it is are songs that you have to fit within the movie. And that was one of our biggest challenges on this movie. And it's pretty much every movie I've ever done. I would love to do an inspired by soundtrack. Like that makes it a little bit easier. You're not as handcuffed with to the movie.
Yeah. Kier, I think you got something to say here.
No, I was, it's agreeing with what he was saying about it's just another challenge. But I think that was also, one of our goals was to make sure that the music did live in the movie. And because hopefully that's going to create a connection with the audience that will, connect them to the music and to the film and kind of deepen that both ways. And so, that was our challenge for sure on this one.
Morgan, you want to start us off here, knowing how big of a Kirk Franklin fan you are? How did you all get Kirk involved, and how did this song come together?
We had a beat. We had gotten a beat from the record label, and it was a Just Blaze beat with a gospel sample, which I thought was incredible, just the sample by itself. And then we were approached by Kirk's I think, publisher early on to say Kirk wanted to be involved, and it just so happened those things just worked together. That beat, I thought, gospel choir, Kirk Franklin, that makes sense in everyone's universe, and he just turned around something for us so quick that really blew us away. He made a very small group of singers sound like a very massive choir, and it was just pretty organic and seamless. I knew that he had done work on, he had written something incredible for the Preacher's Wife back in the day, so I was excited about what he might do with this beat, and he just did something really, really incredible with it. And then just adding Little Baby on, which Archie spoke to, I think was one of the most fascinating for me, coming together two different genres, two major artists, one big up and coming, the freshman class, part of the freshman class of rap, and Kirk Franklin, who is the father of contemporary gospel. So having them together, and it worked for the scene. That scene that you saw, I thought it was just perfectly placed at the end, but perfectly placed there. If you're going to descend from the sky, it's got to be, it should be gospel. So I thought it was one of the great organic pieces that came together in the film.
And how did y'all decide in terms of, number one, did you always know that would be used for Dom's intro, and also deciding about using it to lead off the end credits? Because that's obviously a very marquee position to put into any film.
Kier?
I think we kind of knew first that it felt right for the end of the movie, just because of the kind of scope of it. It feels so epic and leaves you with a positive, feeling and uplifting and optimistic and all those, good feelings that you want to leave people with at the end of the movie. And so I think we kind of probably started there and then thought about, well, is there another way that we can kind of tie this in even deeper to our characters or to the film, in a way that, will make it not just the end credit of the movie, but maybe more of a theme through the movie, a thread through the movie. So I think I don't even remember how it got into that, the introduction spot. We were trying it in a few different places, and that was one that really felt like it came together in a fun way, and that felt organic and to the character. And it was Dom. Dom's obviously, aside from Lebron, but Dom is definitely one of the main characters of the film.
Right.
And so we want to, lift him up and give him some great moments musically.
Yeah. Malcolm, is there anything that you want to add?
Well, I think Kier and Morgan hit it. I would say that we struggled a lot trying to figure out where to place a lot of music, because we had a lot of like a kind of a great temp score in there and temp music. And so, when you're trying to beat a classic or a hit, it's like, all right, here's what we got to hit, or at least let's have that feeling. And I can't say that this hits the feeling, but it hit it differently. And I think that Morgan hit it on the head with this kind of gospel thing. To me, was less about, it was about Dom, but it was more about Al G. Like this is Al G's church, here, and then all these, parishioners are there cheering on, this descending figure from the sky. So yeah, it fit in a very organic way, because it was like we knew it was going to be end credits, but it was like, okay, how can we make use of this, because it's it can be a featured song.
Yeah.
And so that was it fit there in a different way than the other song that we had there did, but still to what I felt was great effect. Not everybody agreed, by the way, but that's when you get the team that says, you know what, no, this is it, and y'all got to just trust us because you hired us to do the job.
I mean, I thought it was the most memorable placement in the film, and it has to do with, I think, Malcolm, as you're saying, the juxtaposition between this descent from the heavens, but then you have this uplift from the gospel sound of it. And so the meeting between the visual and the sonic there, I thought worked together really, really beautifully. So
it did. I agree. Thank you.
So I'm really fascinated to know about how this track came together, because there's at least two different stories I've told myself. One is that this is the influence of producer Ryan Coogler, who of course is from Oakland. His younger brother is White Dave, who is on the track. And the fact that this song brings together people who are either from Oakland or from Richmond. I mean, this is a very East Bay heavy track. On the flip side, obviously Dame and LeBron know each other. And so in my mind, I just figure, LeBron comes up to Dame and's like, would you like to be in this new Space Jam film? He's like, yes, but only if I get to like drop some bars during it. And that was part of the negotiation. So what's the real story behind how about that time came together?
Dame, like from inception was like, I definitely want to be a part of the music element in this movie. You were pretty spot on in terms of like the Ryan Coogler element. And like, I think when we were trying what we had early, before the beat was finished and before the record was finished, it wasn't moving enough, right? It felt like a direct rip of the Too Short Burn Rubber sample that it is. Mm. And, we all felt really strongly about it. Ludwig took a stab at it and added some more of the sounds and the movement. And we tried it a couple more times. Malcolm liked it, and it actually ended up working for the scene. And I think like the thought going into it was like, Dame always goes crazy when blow the whistle or something from the Bay comes on the court, and Dame time is like a real thing. So like, if there was a way to play on that and potentially like make a new sort of jock jam out of it, like what would that be? So
yeah, awesome. Anyone else want to add?
I just love that. I love that track, and I love that there's a lot of personnel on the track. Because one thing about the first Space Jam is you had songs where there were multiple features. So I like that. I like the Bay Area representation, and I love the character of Kronos. I love the whole freezing time, and every time I watched that clip, I just kept seeing the buzzer beaters in my head, Dame's buzzer beaters, and I just loved him as a character that was larger than life, and him, pointing at his watch. So I love the flow of that song, and I love how it worked in the scene, and I love it. I love all things West Coast, but I love the Bay representation on that one too.
Yeah, I mean, as someone who lived in the East Bay for 14 years, love the track, love the sound of it, and just the minute you hear the beat drops, it's like, oh, this is some Ye stuff right here. So yeah, absolutely.
I left my Niner hat at home for Malcolm today because but
I almost didn't recognize you without it, Arch.
So we go from the town down to the Crescent City. So how did Big Frida get looped into this?
I can't speak to that. Somebody else speak to that, but I want to speak about this song when it's right.
Go. You're already here. Go in.
Well, no, I will say this is, if I'm remembering this correctly, this is one of the earlier songs we got, right? And I loved it. I thought it was like, this is exactly the kind of thing we need for the movie, right? It's kooky, it's fun, it's funky, and I don't know, it's just dope. And like I believe it was always going to go here, even though this scene was in flux for a little while, because this was the first play out of halftime where the Looney Tunes got to be loony, and so it made sense for the scene, and the play took a while kind of to develop in terms of like what all the tunes were going to do, the train. Gosser sucking up, wet fire, and Tweety, and Road Runner with the smoke screen, and Tweety with slamming the ball. So the song, I think at one time we were going to even make it longer, but like where we placed it was like just the right amount of time for it, and it just fit the scene to me like a glove. Like that was like, okay. That's our bar right there, like of songs and song to picture relationship and song to soundtrack. I just felt like it was fantastic.
That was a great moment in the film and in the experience of working on this. And I thought a great moment for Kier and I, because we reacted the same way at the same time. I think I might have texted him like, yo, did you hear that, Big Frida? It was just so perfect. It was, for me, it was love at first listen. I love New Orleans bounce. I love Big Frida's being sort of one of the architects of that sound, along with Magnolia Shorty and a whole bunch of other people. And I love the swag. And she went back and added some flourishes like, oh, we about to knock you out, which I thought was really good, because at that moment, the Toon Squad, they're getting their legs back. They're starting to get their swag back. And she added all those flourishes. It had the right rhythm. Mm-hmm. It's zany, it's kooky, as Malcolm said. And it just was one of the great experiences working on it. It had that energy right at the right time. So yeah, that was for me, like I said, love at first listen.
Morgan, had she heard it before? I mean, had she seen the movie, or was she just, or what? How did we get her involved?
I think, Kier, if I'm not mistaken, I think just her publisher reached out and said, "Hey, we've got a Big Frida track, and if you guys want to take a listen to it." And we were like, "Great!" But I couldn't have predicted it would have been.
Right.
I think we gave them a little bit of information about the kind of things we were looking for, and they got her to build that, and yeah, like Morgan said, as soon as we heard it, we knew that was a special one, and I just love the balance. There's some drama in it, but it's also fun, and I love that balance. Plays that scene so well.
Just nailed it. I mean, it's just like, we gave a lot of briefs to a lot of people. I mean, am I lying? And like, that was the kind of thing that was like, oh, she gets it. And it was, just knocked out of the park. Slam dunk.
Well, we have about 12 minutes for questions here. And actually, we have one that just popped in. Someone mentioned that the Chance the Rapper demo having, it's moving here, having something special, but needing more work. How many back and forths did you go through until you had the final track? And again, I don't know who wants to take this one, either Kier or Morgan.
I think we, maybe like 4 or 5. We definitely went through rounds, and we would get another version and we'd play it for Malcolm, and Malcolm would be like, it's close, but it's not like there yet. And so, we would just keep building on it. And that was, the Chance version, then the Simba edition on it, and then, the strings on it, and then John Legend at the end. So it was a process for that one.
Yeah. I would also say that, like, I think it's such a great song. Like, it's a little buried in the credits, because of all the cheering and the flourishes and slam dunks and things like that. That I think, like, as a song itself, it's a pretty great, fantastic song. And yes, I definitely, threw some notes out. It's like, but when you feel something, when something's close, you keep working it. You keep saying, okay, you know what? Let's get some of this in there. I need like a voice to do blah, blah, blah. I need to flourish here. Like, it's dead right here. Let's do something. Put some drums, or no, it's not drums, it's horns. No, horns are too intrusive. No, try a voice here. So it's a process. But, for the opening credits, you gotta get it.
We had, I'm sorry. Was there someone else who wanted to jump in? Another question from the audience here, and this goes back to something we were talking about earlier about how this film ended up with 2 supervisors. Because, each of you addressed how each of you individually came on board, but again, why the decision to have 2 people rather than just one person? Because I feel like that's somewhat unusual.
That for me, I didn't. Okay, go ahead. Yeah, I'm happy to take that. I think it was understood from the weight of, first of all, 1, having to deal with a record label, 2, having to deal with publishers, 3, having to deal with artists, and then 4, having to manage producers and input into whatever this is supposed to be, which is Malcolm's vision, right? And it's like, sometimes there was needed, that's a lot to ask one person to do on a project of this magnitude, understanding that there are so many opinions to consider and so many people that want this opportunity because of the way that the last one. And the thought was both their taste levels are extremely high, but their palettes are completely different. And I think like us being able to merge those two and see if they would even be willing to work together at first was just like we just were trying to do something different from the jump, Spencer.
Yeah, the one thing I'll add to that too is they were both game from the jump. Like there was no thought process from either person where it was like, I really want to do it on my own. It was like, oh my God, Morgan's interested, Kier's interested, let's go. And that was how it started.
Along sort of similar lines to what Archie was talking about a moment ago in terms of the size and scope of the soundtrack. And everyone here has talked about the fact that in making this film, it was known from jump. It can't just be about the film because the original film and soundtrack were a big deal. So the soundtrack has to live up to that legacy, if you will. No pun intended. So for Kier and Morgan, and I did not do the deepest of dives into your IMDb, but I'm going to guess that even though each of you, of course, have worked on very, very prominent television and movie projects, this might have been the one where you had the best budget to work with, but I don't know if that makes your life easier or harder. Is it like more budget, more problems? Like, how does that work?
My life was easier. I'm going to be honest. I just was like sort of, it made me think bigger and dream bigger about the possibilities. And for me, this was an opportunity to watch a song develop from start to finish, because I'm sort of Captain Needle Drop. And to have original songs to work on that from beginning to end, for me, informed by what we had available in terms of budget, was really exciting for me. So it made me think in a different way. As I've said, the experience of working on Space Jam in general made me think in a different way about music. And again, having an opportunity to work with Kier and this whole team really gave me legs and really helped inform this vision of what I thought this could be, what kind of a moment I thought this could be. And that was really awesome for me.
Question.
Yeah, I think,
sorry, go ahead.
But I think it's a little bit along the lines of more money, more problems, but I think it's just more expectations. I think it's really what it is. And so if you have a lot of money, then people will expect that you're going to get the biggest artists and be able to afford it or get them excited about it or have them want to be involved. And so there were a lot of artists that wanted to be involved, but there were others that we had to chase down. And there was a ton of music in this movie that I think I forget the count, but there's probably 50 or 60 needle drops in this movie. So there's a ton of stuff in there, and a lot of featured moments. So we did have a good chunk of money, but once you spread it out among 60 spots, then it's not as much for each spot. So there was definitely the management of that about, which are the key songs that are really worth putting a big chunk of money towards, and what are the spots where, that are going to pay off, but aren't creatively, but aren't going to be as much of a hit on the budget. So, a lot of the similar kind of situations that you would get into on a lower budget thing, but we were able to get definitely a higher level of artists involved.
Yeah. Question from the audience about whether or not anything in the genre of rock, whether it be rock musicians or just rock music, was considered for the soundtrack at all.
I think I think I remember maybe pitching some songs early on, as part of like options and in batches for scenes, but it didn't really seem to fit, I think the time or the characters. I think I felt like we do hear rock music in stadiums during games. And so maybe there was a place for it that way. But I think we, really leaned towards R&B and pop and hip hop. And that was probably kind of everybody's expectation as we started making the movie.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I mean, what about what would you consider that song? Run Wild. Is that pop? What would you guys consider that? Was it no beat? No. Who's what's that genre?
That most right? Yeah, I think that's pop and rock for sure.
Probably the closest we got, to it. I wasn't opposed to it. I don't think anybody was. I don't want to say anybody. I don't think anybody on this call was opposed to it. It just had to fit the movie.
Right. And I would also think that to the extent, and this goes back to something was said really at the beginning of the panel, that if you wanted the soundtrack to this to tap into the now, I'm definitely not going to be one of those rock is dead kind of folks. But in terms of its prominence within the musical landscape, rock is not where it's at right now. Maybe grunge will make a comeback at some, but who knows? But that's not how things sound it's not how things sound in 2020, 2021. Sorry, am I still coming through?
Yep.
Okay. I thought I lost my mic for a second. I think we have time for one more question, and it's actually a pretty good one. Was there any intent to allude or connect this film to its predecessor via the music used?
I think one of the things that was a connection was the track Hoops, which features Salt and Pepper and Cash Doll. Salt and Pepper was on the first soundtrack. So I thought it was a nice nod to the first soundtrack. And that was another thing that came together pretty organically. But it was nice to have, sort of the OGs with a new artist together. But I thought it was a nice way to reference that, as well as pump up the jam too. So I thought we did a good job in having a few little Easter eggs there, and a shout out to the original music.
Yeah, there was
Easter. Go ahead, Malcolm.
No, you go ahead, Archie.
One more Easter egg I wanted to add was the Porky Pig rap. And I guess we could kind of say the Bugs Bunny raps on the first soundtrack, and there was some inspiration from that for sure. But that's another Easter egg to me that was one of those exciting moments.
Yeah, and I just think that there was, it was funny too, because a lot of some labels that come and said, we're saying the 90s is making such a comeback right now. 90s is so much so in. So there was, and obviously that was kind of the golden age of hip hop, or at least that's where it was really flourishing in a way that was getting to the masses. So I think that there were a lot of 90s samples used in a lot of the music. And I was just well, okay, I'm a 90s dude, you know what I mean? So
same.
Let's if it's in, let's do it. I'm down with it, So I think there was, as everyone has said, there's some pieces Pump Up the Jam, there's Jump, there's a Jump thing in there. There was a few things that were kind of very much ode to the 90s.
Yeah. But I would say, and I know we got to wrap up right now, but I do appreciate that the film to me never, and the soundtrack never felt like it was just meant to be a nostalgia machine. And in fact, it actually struck me how few callbacks I felt like I saw or heard watching it. Whereas other films are sometimes so beholden to their predecessor that it just feels like you're watching the same film over. And I definitely didn't get that impression either watching or listening to this film, that it was trying to literally remake the first Space Jam and make it seem like we're still somewhere in 96. In any case, we have a hard out right now because there is a networking event coming up. I just want to thank the whole panel for taking time out on their Saturday to do this. It was such fun talking with you all. And everyone enjoyed the rest of the weekend and the rest of this conference.